What do you think about this? I mean, I think you, like me, feel like we hope that there's a startup movement going on and not just a sort of frothy situation or whatever, bubble, if you will. What do you think about the current startup environment? There's high valuations, lots of new people entering it. Feels a little bit like it could be the late '90s, although not nearly to that extent. But particularly here in New York, worry that we'll have what happened. I mean, here in New York, Silicon Alley is a dirty word. I hate when we hate that word here, and only people from outside use that. That sort of symbolizes this kind of period of where all the finance people kind of came in, and then there was a crash, and New York went back to being Wall Street or something. And what we're hoping is that this is like a genuinely new period of real entrepreneurship where people in New York are actually making things again, right?
Yeah. I really believe that that's true. I wrote a post recently called "Winter is Coming," riffing off the Game of Thrones thing. And I love that analogy because in Game of Thrones, summer and winter are seasons that last multiple years, and then you have to kind of prepare in one for the other. And they have this concept in Game of Thrones called Summer's Children, which are people who were born in summer and have never known winter.
That's true. It's similar.
There's something very similar going on right now.
YC11 is the Summer's Children.
Summer's Children. And what's funny to me is if you look at a bunch of the crop of current startup pundits and gurus, myself included, and you just ask, where did their money come from? Did they make their money in summer or winter? You will find a lot of Summer's Children have made a resurgence in this period. All of a sudden are back as startup gurus. So there is that phenomenon. And I actually think the fact that winter is coming is good news. Because in winter, we're going to flush out a lot of the entrepreneurial organizations and people who aren't really committed to making stuff and creating value and are just about hype and all kinds of other nonsense. And in the post,
you think coming, some of these I don't know what, like incubators or funds?
Yes, I think a large percentage of incubators, co-working spaces, and venture funds are going to fail in winter because the problem
and startups.
Yeah, because the startups that they work with are going to fail, and it's really difficult in summer to know if you're actually creating value or just hanging around people who are themselves hanging around people who are themselves hanging. Like, is it a house of cards? Is it a Ponzi scheme? It's really hard to tell in winter. Now, in summer, if you use actionable metrics and innovation accounting and lean startup model, I believe you can be rigorous and find out if you're creating value even in summer. It's just that in summer the incentives to actually use those ideas are less than in winter. But I think, despite the froth and despite the stuff that's going to die, I really believe a fundamental change is at work. I like calling it a startup movement. I believe for the first time in history, entrepreneurship is now a viable career. That someone out of college can decide, I want to be an entrepreneur for my career. I want to work for startups.
What caused that change? Just cultural, marketing, whatever?
No, I think a lot of it has to do with the science of startups. That is, startups are becoming an increasing part of our economy for reasons of disruptive innovation. We can talk more about that. So the imperative for startups is important. There are big changes under work that are making it easier to start a company than ever before and faster to test ideas. And also, we're just getting good at it. There's more and more entrepreneurs around to talk who've started to blog and talk about. The internet has brought all these ideas about entrepreneurship to all corners of the globe. And so I think people are copying, the secret sauce of places like Silicon Valley and, not exactly replicating it, but trying to take the lessons from that experience and figure out how do we create other vibrant hubs, how do entrepreneurs come together to start each other. To me, it feels like the birth of the management profession 100 years ago. That a few decades from now, entrepreneur will be a title that you can have on your business card, even if you work in a big company. We'll understand that that's a job you do, just like general manager is a job.
Yeah, and we just sort of joked about incubators. I personally think, for example, like Y Combinator's done a great job in making this a legitimate post-college career path, and sort of like the people that would have gone to Goldman Sachs and Google and McKinsey now sort of see this as like a reasonable way, kind of like an on-ramp, and I give them huge credit for that.
Huge props.
They're a big part of that. I think
they've really made the world a better place by getting more people into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I think I think obviously they will, and a lot of the other good incubators I hope stick around. I think one of the what I think a lot about is how can people like us make sure that when winter does come that it's not that bad, I guess. And like, how do we make sure that this thing sort of sustains beyond, through that winter, I guess, or whatever.
I'm glad that people like you especially are thinking about this, because my number one kind of area of concern are the hubs like New York that are so vibrant
that's what I'm
right now.
Yeah, because being in New York, like Silicon Valley will always be Silicon Valley. New York, we could turn back, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
so
you have the ever-present menace of finance just down the street. I mean, literally down the street to suck your talent away. So I mean, I think if we can make the case in New York, of all places, that entrepreneurship is a viable career on par with law or finance, then we will have done something really good for the world. And I think the most important thing to ask ourselves, all of us in the ecosystem, investors, entrepreneurs, PR, every person who works in the ecosystem, is think about the places you're spending your time, the people you're spending your time with, the places you're investing energy. How do you know that those places are really creating value? And if the answer is, well, those companies seem to be going on to higher and higher valuations, check. Wait, hold on. Is that actually a good indicator? Because everyone's going on to higher and higher valuations. Even the worst companies are getting funded. Is there a way that I could just be a little bit more rigorous to just, double check that they're really making stuff? Somebody at the bottom of this house of cards is making stuff that customers care about and is really making the world a better place.